Patch 3.3.5 brought some changes to the game, and one of them is ailments got somewhat fixed. They got rid of the double dipping, so you are no longer doing 10 times the damage you should, and I see a lot of people saying ailments are dead. Today I will be proving that it is still more than viable. So the main thing that changed in the build is we are now using Consume. Before the patch, I was skeptical of how good Consume is, since things die so fast and it doesn't even need to be consumed. Now that they fixed the double dipping, Consume is actually really good. So how does Consume work? For you to be able to consume, first you have to have one of the two consume items. The first one being Diamond Charm, your charge heavy attacks consume ailments. The second one is the Heavenly Reversal Ring, your timing attacks consume ailments. If I apply shock to this enemy and I use a charge heavy attack, you can see that the ailment got consumed and the damage got dealt in a single hit. The same goes with timing attacks. So you might ask, why use consume? Isn't the damage already going to be dealt over time anyways? Why sacrifice a ring or a charm slot for this, right? The main reason for that is, before the patch, the ailment DPS looked like this. The base damage times the increased modifiers, which is like weapon technique damage, damage to shock, damage for each type of ailment on the enemies. They're all additive with each other, so it increases the initial hit for the damage. And then the initial hit gets timed by a certain percentage to be calculated as the ailment tick damage. And then the ailment tick damage gets multiplied by the increased modifiers again. And then it gets multiplied by ailment power. So as you can see, the increased modifiers got counted twice, which is why I was calling it double dipping. And now they fix it. So after the patch, the DPS becomes it just lost one whole multiplier. And that multiplier was really big. A lot of times it might be 10 times the damage. So after they fix it, you just lost 10 times your damage. And it doesn't feel good anymore, right? So we need another multiplier for this to work. That is why we use Consume. What Consume allows us to do is add ailment duration to the equation. Ailment duration typically only increases your total damage, but not your DPS. So when you consume the damage, it actually just applies all of the damage over time in one single hit. So it massively increases our kill speed and it increases our DPS. Now onto the gear. For the weapon, I'm still using the Primal Rehearsed Shame. This is the reason why I'm able to apply so many stacks of shock on the enemy so fast. And if you want to know how it works, you can look at my previous video where I explain it. For the secondaries, you want critical hit chance, damage to shock enemies, weapon technique damage, ailment power, and ailment duration. All of these are really good choices. You can also still use Sunflare Destinies like this with double shockwave primary and hopefully good secondaries. The reason I'm not using this anymore is because the secondaries are just so much worse than this one. So it actually doesn't give that much more damage compared to this. And this just gives me so much quality of life because the crit chance with Land Talisman. For the amulet, I'm using Grandmaster's Station. It gives me the mark of weakness whenever I inflict ailment. This is a lot of survivability. But there are also some pretty good options for amulet. The first being Amulet of Betrayer, which gives you damage immunity whenever you reach 0 health, and it has a 10-minute cooldown. And the other one being the new Cursed Amulet, which gives you ailment consumption damage. This is the only source, as far as I know, that gives you ailment consumption damage. And how this works is it is actually a straight multiplier to your ailment consumption damage. So if you're doing 3 million consumes, times 3 million by 1.3, and you get near 4 million consume. So it is very strong for damage. But because I think I'm doing enough damage, so I'm still going for the mark of weakness. If you think you want more damage, or if you're struggling with damage, you can definitely use this one. The secondaries are the same. Critical hit chance, ailment power, ailment duration is all very good. Another really interesting option is the new Curse Amulet that got added this patch, because before that I believe it wasn't actually dropping. This one gives 25 shield charge speed and 25 shield damage for each capped resist. And we have all 6 resistance capped, so it gives us about 150 shield charge speed and 150 shield damage. What this allows us to do is have a about 12-second cooldown shield, and it's just so much utility. You can use it to knock down enemies, you can use it to dash to enemies. It's just so nice. So definitely try this out. It's very, very strong. The charm, I'm using Land Talisman. This is just too much quality of life for me to ever drop it, especially because it is the primal version. It gives me so much weapon technique charge speed, and it just increases your speed of the build. But if you don't mind the slow speed and you want to do really, really big damage on bosses, you can go for a charm like this one. The Ram Talisman, which applies Mark of Fragility whenever you inflict an ailment, and you can instead of using the Mark of Weakness, you use the Mark of Fragility, because you only can have one mark on an enemy at a time. So if you use this, it will just massively increase your damage. And the secondaries, you still want ailment power, ailment duration, and if you're using Land Talisman, you want crit chance. For the rings, I'm using the timing attack ring to allow me to consume ailments. And the other ring I'm using Eye of the Dragon. Even though I don't need the weapon technique inflict ailments anymore because my rehearse shame got updated, but the overhealth is just so nice. There's another option for you to go for if you want overhealth. As you can see, 1000 damage dealt, and you get 24 overhealth, right? So we're consuming millions of damage. You are always going to get full overhealth from this, and it is very, very strong. But the problem when I was testing it is you rarely really get to consume against anything that isn't a boss. So typically you want overhealth when you're clearing mobs, because you might get jumped from behind and you get chunked for a big hit. Against bosses, you don't really get hit actually, because you kill them so fast, and you have Arc of Fury, you have banners, you have life stones to allow you to sustain your health. But yeah, on paper this looks really, really strong, but after testing, I still prefer the Eye of the Dragon. For the life stones and banners, it doesn't really matter that much, but if you want to min-max the damage, you can go for the ailment power, ailment duration, and Plague Pendant with ailment power and ailment duration if you want. Now to the augments. This is the main reason why I'm now using Mesa instead of Mobius. It is mostly because these three might augments line up together. It allows us to use Twilight Bloom, which gives us a ton of damage for our weapon technique, which increases our initial hit. And the primal version goes up to about 150%, so that's absolutely crazy. But I'm only using the regular version because this one is the only one that has ailment duration on it. But if you have ailment power or ailment duration on your primal one, definitely go for it. For the other might augments, I'm using Force of Nature, which gives me weapon technique charge whenever I defeat an enemy. And then Iron Heart, which gives us crit chance, which allows me to proc Lion Talisman more. For the Vitality ones, these two shock ones we're still using, the shock duration and the shock power. I forgot to mention this in my previous video. You have to have 60% or more air resistance for this to work. So to achieve that, the default resistance cap is 50%. So you need to increase it by 5% by picking the last level of the cap to all resist. So it gives 5%, 55% now, and we can get 2% from the ascension level here. 0.4% cap to all resist for every point, and we have 5 points, so that's 2%. And don't worry if you don't have this yet, we can fix it in gear. But in gear, you can get things like this. It rolls with 3% cap to all resist, and you can upgrade it to 6%. And this stat rolls on amulet, charms, and rings, so you can get it from all 4 of these spots. And you only need one of them to roll with it. And you can upgrade it to 6%. And another important thing to remember is it only seems to roll on vitality basis. So as you can see, this is a vitality ring, so you can roll cap to all resist. let's say you have the might ring like this, then it probably can't roll that. And we cap our resist no problem. The main source of our resist comes from the presence of mind augment. You do not need to have primal version. The regular version will capture resist just fine. I'm only using the primal version here because it has good secondaries. Glamour and Rift to give me more damage for the initial hit. And the last one is just a random augment. I'm using shield charge on kill because it's nice to have some shield. But yeah, just use whatever that has good secondaries. For the secondaries in general, you want as much ammo power and ammo duration you can get. Do not get weapon technique damage on the first secondary because the masterwork only gives you weapon technique damage instead of ammo power or ammo duration. But yeah, you want, even for the might ones, you want to look for ammo duration or ammo power because we have too much initial hit damage already. As you can see in my detail stat, without the primal Twilight Bloom, I'm already at about 220 weapon technique damage. And then you have to add stuff like Lamer and Rift, which is about 120% in total. And Ascension Powers, that gives me 25%. This got nerfed. It used to be 40%, but 25% is still a lot. And then there's also the skill that gives you 50% and 20%, so 35% in total. So in total, I'm sitting at about 400 plus. Yeah, about 400 to 450% initial hit damage, increased initial hit damage. So you want to balance it out with your ammo power and ammo duration because they are multiplicative with each other. So you want to get as much ammo power and ammo duration elsewhere. So I have them all here on my augments. Another thing to remember is the damage to shock, as you can see here, when upgraded, actually breaks. They still haven't fixed it yet. Hopefully they fix it soon. But yeah, do not do what I did here. You want to upgrade ammo power or ammo duration instead. For the skills, the important things you want to pick up is 5 points into weapon technique and at least 1 point into weapon timing attacks. You can only use the first one. The second one, especially for the polearm, the heavy attack, actually doesn't really work that well because it only hits one enemy and it also misses a lot. So yeah, the first one is probably enough. Sundering Slam, which is a massive multiplier for our damage. Critical hit chance. Good for Lion Talisman. Resistance, all 5 points. You want that. Shield Throw is really nice utility I found, especially the level 5 one. I'm actually so in love with that move. It's like another spectral takedown. It feels like ailment, 5 points ailment for a lot of damage, 5 points takedowns to deal with shield enemies, and lastly polarity attacks. The reason I'm using polarity attacks here is mainly because I like to use um the polearm that gives you greater blessing of endurance whenever you inflict an ailment as my offhand. Let's see if I can find it here. There's greater blessing of endurance whenever you inflict an ailment. The polarity attacks inflict ailments. So this allows whenever I charge up the polarity attack and I can swap to this polearm to do the polarity attack. And then I'll get the greater blessing of endurance, which is a ton of damage reduction for however long that lasts. And I can just swap back to my Rehearse Shame and keep on killing stuff. You can also pop this before a boss so you don't get one shot by the boss. On screen right now is my attempt to solo Tower 30 with no boons with this build. And I say attempt because the game bugged out at floor 27 and it didn't let me continue. But the build is definitely strong enough to do all 30 floors without any boons and without any deaths. Ironically enough, I did this attempt faster than with my previous shock build before the nerf, and it finished all 27 floors in about 55 minutes. So the whole run, if I got to level 30, will probably be around an hour and 5 to 10 minutes around there, very comfortably.